Hello, I'm Vivian McGrath from beingunbeatable.com, and in this video I'm going to be talking about emotionally immature parents and children of emotionally immature parents, particularly adult children, because they are often affected by emotionally immature parents and go into dysfunctional or abusive relationships. So at the end of this video, I'm going to explain to you what the signs of emotionally immature parents are, how they may have affected you to go into a relationship that's not really good for you, and how you can break that cycle and deal with a narcissistic or emotionally immature parent as you are an adult. When we look at adults and parents in particular, we see them as the grown-ups. We think, well, they're the grown-up and their children are the ones that they are nurturing and teaching and guiding to become healthy adults. But what happens if that's not the case? What happens if it's the reverse? The parent, in fact, is emotionally immature. And in a way, the child is forced to grow up and become a role reversal, become a bit more of the mature parent themselves. Emotionally immature parents can come in many forms. You know, you might get the one that's very emotional. They erupt in this emotional distress and it's all about me, and my needs and my issues, and everybody else in the family walks on eggshells, and when this happens, they run around trying to work out what's wrong and if they can fix it. And no one really knows what it's all about, but they just know they've got to keep the peace and fix it. They have very little empathy. They can't see their child's needs. And in fact, they are really uncomfortable about emotion, so they can't deal with emotion in others, let alone nurturing that emotion in their children. Or you might get the driven parent, the one that is, that appears to be holier than thou and self-sacrificing, the martyr who's busy, running around, volunteering for everything, fixing things, offering their advice. And they might look like these really noble parents, but at the heart of it, especially with their children, it's all about, I actually know better than you, and I am going to drive forward with my opinions and how you need to be, and I'm going to control it because I think everybody should live up to my standards and my needs. And quite often when it comes to children, they will drive you towards the career that they think you should have, the success that they dream that you are going to have, and they're going to live through that, but you're never going to live up to their exacting standards. Or you might get the parent who is the opposite of that, rejects you and just builds this wall around them. And it's like, well, why have they even got children? Because they're not interested in them. And they just, a child learns to pull away and pull back and be sort of not get attention, not draw attention to themselves, because it will just draw irritation from that parent. And that can be soul destroying for a child because their emotional needs have been neglected. They're abandoned in a sense. Or finally, you might get a parent who's just passive. Now, they might appear the loving, caring one, but in the face of a very dominant partner, usually another emotionally immature parent, they just take the path of least resistance. And when there's any chaos or drama or trouble, that passive parent will just pull back and put their head in the sand. And they might even turn a blind eye to behavior from another parent that is quite emotionally damaging, or even behavior that's harmful, such as incest. So what are the signs that your parent is emotionally immature? Some of them are, for example, they feel really uncomfortable with emotion. And if you want to start to talk to them as a child or even as an adult, about how you feel and about, something you're upset about, then they won't go there. They'll just change the subject, or they'll blame it on you. You're too sensitive, you're too emotional. Or they'll just say, I can't change who I am, and dismiss you. Subject closed. They can be very egocentric. It's all about me, 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 me. So there's no room for your needs or to nurture you. You might find that they become very enmeshed in you. They choose one sibling that is the favorite, where they enmesh totally in their lives and they control them and squash them, because that child is an extension of them. And their happiness depends on that child's success and making them look good, for example. Whilst another sibling will just be deemed to be the little adult one that they just get ignored and left to their own devices and left alone to nurture their own needs. So it might be different with different children. They might ignore you completely unless you're sick. And they rarely accept any blame for anything that makes you uncomfortable or behavior that's really not acceptable. It's all about them. So as I was saying before, if suddenly they have this emotional distress, everybody in the family needs to pander to them and make them feel good. Now, they'll also dismiss you. If you feel upset, they'll just say you're wrong. So as a child, when you grow up with that, you sort of have these uncomfortable feelings and your instincts are telling you that something's not right. But if you challenge that parent or ask them, they dismiss them. So you learn as a child that your gut instincts are wrong because you don't want to think that your parent is wrong. So as a child, this makes you feel confused, like your gut instincts are wrong because it can't be your parent that's wrong. You might feel anger, but you have to suppress it because it's not safe to reveal emotions with that emotionally immature parent. So you suppress that anger and you swallow it. And quite often that can go inward and later manifest into self-harm, feelings of guilt, feelings of depression, might even go far as suicidal thoughts. And you also feel that you can't talk to your parent. A healthy adult is someone who is very comfortable at discussing emotion. They're very secure with their sense of self-esteem. So they're not threatened by another person's point of view. So you can go to that parent and feel safe that if you express a different point of view or you express the fact that you feel upset about something, they're going to have your back and they're going to nurture you and tell you it's okay and help you process those feelings. But an emotionally immature parent, on the other hand, they can't deal with that. So as a child, you grow up not feeling that you have anyone you can talk to, feel safe with, or you can trust. And you grow up as well feeling you're not good enough. Nothing you do or say is good enough for them. It's always your fault if they feel unhappy. And you just think that nothing you do is good enough, nor are you good enough. So you grow up with this sense of real inadequacy, and it lends itself to making you feel as an adult and as a child through to adulthood, that you have this sense of emptiness. There is a hole inside, and you don't feel good enough. And so you grow up because you can't turn to your parent, you have to try and soothe that fear and that hole and that gap somehow. Because as a child, you don't understand what it is. You know, you just feel this sense of loneliness, like you're the only one alone in the world, but you don't know what it is. You don't understand that, in fact, where it's come from is your parent themselves was probably brought up by an emotionally immature adult and parent who didn't fulfill their emotional needs because they were incapable of fulfilling their own, so they couldn't deal with their children's either. And that has passed down to your parent and down to you. And so you don't understand that as a child. You just know you've got this feeling of not being good enough, that you don't belong, that you don't fit in, that there's this hole inside. So the way you try to fill that is you create this fantasy in your head. You think, if only I can be pretty enough, if only I can be good enough, if only I can love somebody enough, then I'm going to be happy. If only I can be famous enough or rich enough. Whatever it is that's external that you can go and find to plug that hole inside. And in relationships, what happens is that manifests in you not only, unfortunately, recreating your childhood, because we do that. We think we go for what's familiar. So we go for a person who reminds us of how we felt as a child. And sadly, when you were brought up by emotionally immature parent or parents, and you were brought up in chaos and your needs not being met, that familiarity is finding someone who is exactly like that. And you don't understand that they are emotionally immature as an adult as well, and they're never going to meet your needs. But you just think, well, if I love them enough, if I just keep changing my behavior and being a people pleaser enough, then I can make them love me how I feel in this fantasy in my head. One day I will be loved, and that's going to solve everything, and I'm going to be happy. My knight in shining armor will make me find this life where I can live happily ever after. And it was only when I realized that was just a fallacy. That was a dream that I was chasing. I could see things for what they really were. You know, I went into this relationship with my ex. I didn't even really want to go into it. I didn't like him at first. I was swept off my feet by this whole sort of this person that I think recreated this feeling from childhood that I could rescue him. And he was the one that I could save and rescue, and therefore be the one that would turn him into this dream man I had that was going to be the one who would save me. And that's really screwy. I know it sounds crazy now. But I thought if I could, I was attracted to this type that was needy, that was like my emotionally immature mother in a way. And that familiarity of him being needy and not being able to deal with emotion and being immature was familiar to me. So I recreated that, and I thought, well, I can just rescue him. I can fix this. I've got this. I can do it. And I did this with everything in my life. In fact, I thought, well, I could just be this people pleaser, this chameleon. I could hide where no one would work out who I really was. But if I just spouted off their opinions, the opinions of those that looked really confident to me, if I could just copy them and be like them, and if I could just find this guy that I could rescue and turn into that dream guy who was going to save me and fulfill all those needs that I was desperate to have filled, and just love me the way I thought I needed to be loved, that everything would be okay. But I started to see it for who he was, and the relationship for what it was. And I got to the point where I hit rock bottom. I had no choice but to see it for what it was. I was so exhausted from trying to do everything I could to make him love me and be that guy that in my head I thought he could be. I couldn't fix him. He was so emotionally damaged and needy, and he was the same as me. We were both damaged kids from having emotionally immature parents as role models. And so I was never going to save him. And I also hated the person I'd become. I just didn't like me anymore. I thought I was so far from anyone I liked. I just didn't know who I was anymore. I was lost. So I hit rock bottom. And that's when I saw me for the first time. I saw this frightened little child whose emotional needs weren't met, and just craved that hole I felt inside and that feeling of not being good enough to be soothed. And I was in a relationship where that was never going to happen. And I realized that it was only me that could do that, who could love myself. And I had to learn to grow up, and I had to learn to become the adult. And the only way to do that was I was going to have to learn to nurture myself and love that little girl and nurture that little child's needs and learn to teach her self-love, because no one else was going to do that. And once I learnt to do that, I was also able to set very strong boundaries. Now, this is not just with my ex. I was able to learn to say, no, I will not accept that abuse anymore, to walk away and keep walking, no matter how much that hurt and how hard that was. I learnt that if I loved me and nurtured me and really respected me, I had to set strong and healthy boundaries. I had to be the gatekeeper and the protector of my emotional needs. I was able then to detach from my parents and see them for who they were. Just somebody like me who was trying to do the best that they could at the time with the parameters of what they were taught by their parents. So I could see that they were also frightened little children whose emotional needs weren't met. And perhaps they neglected a little bit of mine along the way. But that was okay. I could learn that I could love them. I just didn't need to like everything about the way they raised me, and separate the two. And then recalibrate that relationship with my parents, one of whom was, quite emotional and narcissistic at times, and the other who was that passive one who would just put his head in the sand and just, take the path of least resistance in the face of that dominant, controlling parent. And now I just set boundaries with them as to what is okay in my relationship with them as an adult and what is not. And what I don't like, I love what I can love about them, and what I don't like, I leave aside, So being a child of an emotionally immature parent, it's complicated, and you do grow up with a real lack of your needs being met. It can lead you into relationships that are dysfunctional and not great until you can understand where it came from, and then step in and become that adult that nurtures the child, the one you never had. So you do that. You teach yourself self-love. you learn those strong boundaries, and then you grow up. And hopefully you can break that cycle like I did. And I'm really proud of the fact that somehow I managed to not become, well, I was for a while, but I managed to amend it and not become an emotionally immature parent. I was an emotionally immature adult for a while until I really nurtured that. And then I broke it and didn't become an emotionally immature parent. And as a result, I'm very, very proud that I have raised 2 boys into very healthy men. So sorry, that was a long-winded video and I'm just talking off the hip. But I thought it was really important, and I was really inspired by, I want to do some videos like this about books that have inspired me. And what really has helped me recently to again just understand how I was affected by my childhood and how that informed relationships as an adult, and how I learnt to break those patterns and turn my life around. And one of those books was one that is called Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. And I've got it here. And it's How to Heal from Distant, Rejecting, or Self-Involved Parents by Lindsay C. Gibson. And that is it. And I will put the link to this book, which I think will be life-changing for you. I'll put the link to that book in the comments or somewhere below. So have a read of that. It's really worthwhile. And I hope that this video was helpful. If it was, please, subscribe, share, click the like button, or just give me your comments. I'd love to hear what you think. Are you the child of an emotionally immature parent? And how has that affected you?